Hi, I'm Bob Baulch with the That's Jesus channel. We are in a book study on Earl Irvin West's The Search for the Ancient Order. In the last episode, we walked through the painful story of the Nashville church and how a brilliant young preacher led the most important Southern congregation into spiritualism, and how P.S. Fall was called back to rebuild what had been wrecked. Today, we are in Volume 1, Chapter 15, titled Educational Enterprises. From the very beginning, the Restoration movement was putting energy into two things: the press and the classroom. By the time of the Civil War, the Brethren had built three major colleges that would shape generations of preachers and teachers: Bacon College, Bethany College, and Franklin College. All three of them had Bible study at their core, and all three of them ran into trouble. And all three of them tell us something important about how the Brotherhood understood Christian education in West's eyes. All right, from 1835 until his death, Alexander Campbell pressed on one main need: the colleges of America were not teaching the Bible. The universities were not training young men in moral and spiritual character. Education without Scripture, Campbell believed, was incomplete and dangerous. So Campbell's favorite line of thinking divided man into three states: the natural state, the pre-natural state, and the supernatural state. Man, as he was, as he is, and as he will be. Man is a physical, intellectual, and spiritual being. No education can be complete that does not train all three of those: physical, intellectual, and spiritual. Well, to train a man's mind without training his soul, Campbell said, is like putting a high-powered weapon in the hands of a savage. But Campbell was not arguing for theological seminaries. He had no use for those. He wanted just regular colleges that taught the regular subjects plus the Bible, sacred history, and the scriptures. Campbell wrote, they are just as necessary in training school teachers and lawyers and doctors and farmers and merchants and mechanics as they are in training preachers. Colleges, as far as religion is concerned, Campbell wrote, must be a blight to any community if they are conducted without religion and the Bible. The conviction launched a generation of school building. All right, Bacon College. That was the first. It opened in November 1836 in Georgetown, Kentucky. It owed its existence to a man named Thornton Johnson, a West Point graduate and a civil engineer who had gone to Georgetown to teach at the Baptist College there. Now, Johnson became close friends with Barton W. Stone, who lived nearby. And when the Baptist village pushed Johnson out for not sharing their doctrine, well, Johnson started his own school. He named it Bacon College in honor of Sir Francis Bacon, the great philosopher. Walter Scott was the first president, though for unclear reasons, Scott served only long enough to deliver an inaugural address. And then D.S. Burnet became the president. The first faculty included Tolbert Fanning as professor of natural history. Bacon College struggled with money from the very beginning. Local opposition was fierce. The state legislature barely granted the charter for it to exist. By 1839, the trustees announced that they would move the college to any town that would raise $50,000 in subscriptions. Well, Major James Taylor of Harrodsburg, he saw an opportunity, and he raised 100 subscriptions of $500 each, plus another $10,000 for a building site. In May of 1839, Bacon College moved to Harrodsburg, but the financial problems followed. And by 1840, the college brought in James Shannon as president. He was a prominent educator from Ireland with a fine reputation, and Shannon worked through the 1840s. The school expanded its property, its endowment grew, but money kept getting harder. And then came a turning point that revealed something important. Carol Kendrick, was editing the Ecclesiastical Reformer in Kentucky, and he charged that the Kentucky Brethren were refusing to support Bacon College because it was not really serving them. Well, Shannon defended the college by pointing to the school's charter. The charter borrowed from Center College in Danville stipulated that no particular doctrines of any sect could be taught. Shannon defended Bacon by saying that they were teaching the Bible, but they had consistently refused to teach the peculiar doctrines of the churches of Christ. And for the first time, many Kentucky brethren learned that they were considered, according to Shannon, a sect. Wow. It was a revealing moment. The very thing that made the school respectable to the world made it useless to the brethren who were paying for it. Well, Kendrick was probably right. Bacon College was not serving the people who supported it. Shannon resigned in 1850 to become president of the University of Missouri. The trustees closed Bacon College in June of 1850. But the buildings did not stay empty for long. Samuel Hatch ran a high school in the Bacon College buildings to keep the property in use and to avoid legal complications. By 1855, even that high school had closed. Then John B. Bowman had an idea. Why not establish a university on the ruins of Bacon College? In October 1855, Bowman proposed it at a meeting of the Brethren in Harrodsburg. The board approved, and by November of 1856, Bowman had raised $100,000. Soon it was $150,000. The new charter called for a self-perpetuating board of 30 curators, 2/3 of whom had to be members of the Church of Christ in Kentucky. The state legislature, it approved the charter in January of 1858, and the school began operation as Kentucky University in September of 1859. The new president was Robert Milligan, an Irish-born educator who had been baptized at Cane Ridge way back in 1838 and had taught at Indiana University and Bethany College before coming to Kentucky. The school had nearly 200 students at the opening session, but political excitement and the turn of the Civil War, well, that cut into attendance. After the Battle of Perryville in October of 1862, the Confederate Army seized the buildings and used it for a hospital. One night in February 1864, the main building burned to the ground. And when Transylvania University in Lexington offered its property if Kentucky University would relocate, the trustees accepted. The university opened its doors in Lexington in October 1865. Interesting story. Well, while Bacon was struggling in Kentucky, Alexander Campbell had been waiting to launch a college of his own. He had only told D.S. Burnet about his plans. He had decided to wait until Bacon was on its feet before competing for the same money. By October of 1839, Alexander Campbell was finally ready. He announced Bethany College in the Millennial Harbinger. Campbell's vision was clear. We want no scholastic or traditional theology, he wrote. We don't want that. We want a much more intimate, critical, and thorough knowledge of the Bible. The whole Bible as the book of God than is usually given in the so-called theological schools. That's the terms that he's using. Well, the Virginia legislature, it granted the charter in the winter of 1840, and the first faculty meeting was held in Bethany in May of that year. The first donation, $1,000, came from Philip B. Pendleton. Bethany College opened in October of 1841 with 102 students from 9 states and Canada. 20 classes were formed. The first class met at 6:30 every morning. Alexander Campbell walked from his home 3/4 of a mile away to teach his one daily class. Robert Richardson designed the college emblem, a tripod supporting 2 volumes of truth and science with a quiver of arrows and a bow above. The Latin motto translated is truth gives the quiver, science the arrows. Truth was using the arrows to pierce her enemies. The rules were strict in this college. Bethany said that every entering student had to bring testimonials of his good moral character. All students dressed alike in dark gray or black, and the college bell rang every morning at dawn, and every student had to be up. Campbell had one disappointment that every college president since has shared. Some parents, he wrote, had mistaken either the character of their sons or the character of his institution. They seemed to regard it as a kind of penitentiary where boys of doubtful or desperate character could be sent in the hope of reformation. Well, Campbell had to make it clear that he was running a college, not a reform school. Bethany had advantages that Bacon College never had. The best talent in the brotherhood made up its faculty. The dream of every young man was to sit at Campbell's feet, not in some college named after Sir Walter Bacon. Campbell's reputation and his wide acquaintances among wealthy supporters, well, that made fundraising easier for Bethany College as well. Campbell put it plainly. Bethany College, he wrote, is the only college known to us in the civilized world that was founded upon the Bible. It is not a theological school founded upon human theology, nor a school of divinity founded upon the Bible, but a literary and scientific institution founded upon the Bible as the basis of all true learning. Wow. Alexander Campbell thought a lot about his college. Bethany's isolated location in the hills of Northern Virginia gave it protection during the Civil War, actually. The school continued without interruption while the country tore itself apart. Disaster did strike one night, though. In December of 1857, a fire burned the main college building to the ground, costing the school $60,000. The library was lost, but classes were interrupted for only one day. Rebuilding began immediately. And that is Bethany College. The third college is Franklin College near Nashville. It was Tolbert Fanning's creation. Like Campbell, Fanning believed that American education had overlooked the need of the Bible. Years before, Fanning wrote that he had decided to devote his life not to law and not to preaching, but to the education of the youth. He believed he could do the most good in the classroom. So he purchased a farm near Elm Crag, 6 miles southeast of Nashville, and he partnered with a man named B. Embry. B. Embry. They invested $15,000 of their own money and obligated themselves for $5,000 more. Franklin College opened in January of 1845 with 45 students. The number soon grew to 70. But Franklin College was unlike any other school in the Brotherhood. Fanning had unique conviction about education. First, he divided education into 3 parts: physical, moral, and intellectual. The regular college courses gave intellectual training. The Bible furnished the moral training. But for the physical, every boy who attended Franklin College spent part of every day working on the farm. Fanning was convinced that real men were trained, not just educated. Second, Franklin College had no endowment and refused to accept one. Fanning argued against endowments. Campbell himself wrote that this was probably a mistake. No college, Campbell pointed out, had existed for 1 century without an endowment of some kind. And Fanning, though, was undeterred. He would have no endowments. Third, Franklin College emphasized that money should not be the goal. Fanning wrote that there are few things more vain and corrupting than the idea that colleges give denominational respectability. The honor of God and the good of man, he said, should be the only study. Well, Franklin College trained many of the South's outstanding preachers in the years before the Civil War. Fanning continued as president until 1857, when he stepped down because he was too busy and too often absent. W.D. Carnes, president of East Tennessee University, became the next president. By 1860, the future of Franklin College looked brighter than it had ever been. And then the political election of 1860, and then the rumbles of war, and then the war itself. The boys from Franklin College left to join the Army, obviously. W.D. Carnes went home. Franklin College closed its classrooms. For the next several months, soldiers from first the South and then the North used Franklin College buildings as their barracks. It would be years before anything like normal education resumed in the South, and by the time it did, the educational landscape of the Brotherhood had changed. One thing before we close, because this was a great episode on colleges, one thing before we close. Notice how West treats the two main Bible colleges. Bethany is described in admiring detail. We didn't get through all of those because this is just a summary of the international students, the famous faculty, the wealthy backers, the survival through the war. Franklin gets a different treatment. Manual labor on the farm, no endowment by principle, eventually shut down by the war. West never says that one college is better than the other, but the way that the chapter is organized, with Bethany just cresting and Franklin closing, it tells you which institution the Brotherhood's center of gravity moved towards. West doesn't really point to that. He just kind of lays the facts out and he lets you see it. I think that's some excellent writing by Mr. West, and I appreciate it. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode on educational enterprises. Next time we are in Volume 1, Chapter 16, called Laird and McGarvey. Make sure you go to thatsjesus.org for links to this and all of my playlists. I've even got a playlist of some of my sermons on there. YouTube has been really great at exposing a lot of my sermons and these series to people, and I appreciate it very much. If you would consider supporting the channel, I think it's like 99 cents or $1.50 to become a member, and you will have early access to all of the videos that I publish. And I just would really appreciate it. It will offset the costs of putting all this together. It does cost over $100 a month to put everything together with all of the subscriptions that I have. So your membership would be greatly appreciated. Well, if you have the time, please like and share, comment, and subscribe. We always end with the same question: are you trusting something to save you, or are you trusting the Savior? I'm Bob Baulch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed.